No one saw it coming. Not the fans, not the analysts, not even the players walking off the field with their heads down. The Cleveland Browns had just suffered one of the most embarrassing losses of the NFL season, getting humiliated by the New York Jets in what looked more like a preseason scrimmage than a playoff push. Most assumed the worst part of the night was already behind them. They were dead wrong. Because what allegedly happened behind closed doors after the final whistle was far worse than anything that happened on the field. It wasn't just about poor execution or bad play calling. According to multiple insiders and explosive NFL rumors, superstar defensive end and team captain Myles Garrett reportedly exploded in the locker room, delivering a verbal takedown of head coach Kevin Stefanski so intense, so direct, and so personal it left the entire organization shaken. Players froze, coaches went silent, and decades of tension came boiling to the surface in a moment that could change everything for the franchise moving forward. But here's the part that's setting the entire NFL world on fire. What Garrett allegedly said wasn't just emotional, it was specific, demanding, brutally honest. And at the center of it all stands one name that has been stirring controversy for months: Shadur Sanders. So what really happened after that loss that's tearing the Browns apart from the inside? Why is the locker room turning on the coaching staff? And is this confrontation the final straw in one of the league's most unstable front offices? Let's break it all down. On paper, the Cleveland Browns were supposed to dominate. This wasn't a trap game. This wasn't a team resting starters or playing cautiously. This was a prime opportunity, a national stage, playoff stakes, and a weaker opponent in the New York Jets. The Browns had everything to prove and everything to lose. And they lost everything. The game wasn't just a loss, it was a public unraveling, a full-speed collapse on live television, and it didn't take long for fans and analysts to realize this wasn't just a bad performance. This felt different. There was no fight, no energy, no identity. Just a team that looked completely lost, like strangers wearing the same jersey. From the opening kickoff, something felt off. You could see it in the body language: missed tackles, flat routes, underthrown balls, confused coverage assignments. Every drive looked like it could have been their last, and somehow, it kept getting worse. Defensively, there were gaping holes, breakdowns that caught even casual fans by surprise. Receivers running completely free, linebackers out of position on basic screens, missed tackles turning short gains into back-breaking first downs. And while the scoreboard didn't reflect a total blowout, the soul of the game was already lost by the second quarter. On offense, it was a disaster. Play calling was predictable. Tempo was non-existent. The quarterback play was shaky at best, underwhelming at worst. No rhythm, no urgency, and no sense of accountability. Drives stalled, penalties erased momentum, third downs were automatic failures. It felt like everything that had gone wrong during the Browns' earlier struggles this season had returned in full force, with even more dysfunction than before. The offensive line couldn't protect, the receivers couldn't separate, and the quarterback, whoever was under center, looked completely overwhelmed. And then came the worst part. The cameras panned to the sideline in the third quarter. You could see it in the players' eyes, total disconnect. Defensive linemen yelling in frustration, coaches staring at play sheets like the answers were hiding in the margins, veterans shaking their heads. Body language across the board screamed one undeniable truth: this team was broken. And yet, this was supposed to be a playoff-caliber group, one stacked with elite defensive talent, a squad that had shown flashes of legitimate top-tier potential earlier in the season. But somehow, under the New York City lights, everything crumbled. This wasn't just a bad night at the office. This was a full-blown football implosion. But here's the thing. Bad losses happen. Even great teams have off nights. What separates those moments from full-scale organizational crises is what happens afterward. And that's where the Browns turned a humiliating night into a massive, potentially franchise-altering mess. Because while fans were still venting online, analysts were still collecting their stats, and post-game shows were ramping up their talking points, something else was happening inside the Browns' locker room. Something that will likely be remembered long after the final score is forgotten. In the aftermath of the loss, players didn't just feel disappointment. According to reports, what they felt was betrayal. They felt abandoned by a coaching staff that had lost control. They felt the weight of internal frustrations that have been quietly simmering for weeks. They looked around that locker room not just for answers, but for leadership. And that's when Myles Garrett allegedly stepped forward. Outside the locker room, fans thought the story would be about bad play calls or poor execution. Inside the locker room, a much bigger story was being written. Because according to multiple insiders, what exploded behind those walls wasn't just an argument. It wasn't just shouting, it was truth unfiltered, uncomfortable, and painful. Garrett, arguably the team's most respected voice, didn't hold back. And the loss to the Jets? It was the boiling point. The catalyst, the moment everything that had been building for weeks finally erupted in public view. And once you understand the pressure building inside this team for months, the quarterback controversy, the offensive struggles, the growing silence from players unwilling to publicly challenge decisions, you realize this wasn't just a loss, this was the trigger. There's no overstating what this game truly represented. For outsiders, it was another line in the win-loss column. For players, it was a breaking point. And for the coaching staff, a moment of reckoning. Because when your star player, your captain, your cornerstone starts raising his voice, you better believe he's not just reacting to a scoreboard, he's reacting to a system, a culture, a leadership structure that, according to the whispers leaking from the locker room, is spiraling into dysfunction right before our eyes. What happened during the Jets game wasn't just embarrassing, it was symbolic. A mirror held up to all the deeper issues that have plagued this franchise all season long. And if the reports are true, that moment, the final whistle, the silent walk back into the tunnel, and the voice of Myles Garrett breaking the tension in that locker room was where the real story began. But what exactly did he say? And why did it shake the entire NFL? Let's get into it. The cameras were off. The stadium was emptying. The media was locked out for post-game protocol. And inside that Cleveland Browns locker room, something reportedly unfolded, something intense enough, real enough, and powerful enough that it couldn't be contained by the usual media filters or PR damage control. According to multiple insider sources with direct knowledge of the situation, this wasn't just post-game frustration spilling out. This was a full-on confrontation, raw, emotional, and as explosive as it gets inside an NFL locker room. At the heart of it, Myles Garrett, superstar, team captain, franchise face, usually calm, always professional, but this time, allegedly furious. Reports claim that as teammates quietly attempted to process one of the worst team performances of the season, Garrett did the exact opposite. He stood up, he spoke out, and what he said wasn't filtered by politics or packaged nicely for the press. According to several sources circulating within league circles, Garrett didn't just criticize a few play calls or call out teammates for poor execution. No, he reportedly went straight to the top. Head coach Kevin Stefanski was allegedly called out directly, not behind closed doors between coach and player in a private meeting, but right there in front of the entire locker room, in a moment that some insiders are saying left players stunned and silent. Witnesses described it as one of the most heated post-game encounters they've ever seen from the team, more heated than anything that's come out of this franchise in recent memory. And while most coaches are used to dealing with frustration, this wasn't the kind they could brush aside or excuse as competitive emotion. This was reportedly a direct challenge to leadership. Sources claim Garrett openly questioned not just game decisions during the Jets' loss, but the core philosophy of how this team is being run. He pointed to the lackluster offense, an ongoing issue all season. He criticized the disjointed quarterback play. And most ferociously, he allegedly challenged the Browns' refusal to make the obvious move that fans and players have been demanding for weeks, giving Shadur Sanders a real shot to lead the offense. Now, to be clear, none of this has been officially confirmed by the Browns organization. No one has gone on record. Stefanski downplayed post-game emotions. Garrett hasn't spoken directly about any confrontation, but that hasn't stopped the story, because the rumors are blistering, and they're coming from multiple independent league insiders who've proven to be credible time and time again. And what they're describing is a moment that wasn't just emotional, it was structurally revealing an internal fracture exposed publicly, like a bone snapping under pressure. Insiders say Garrett accused the coaching staff of ignoring the obvious, that the defense has been carrying the weight of the entire team while the offense consistently underperforms. He reportedly told Stefanski that the team was wasting time, wasting talent, and playing scared football. And according to one particularly detailed insider report, Garrett didn't stop there. He allegedly said the Browns were choking away the season to protect feelings and egos, instead of doing what's right. Let that sink in. A player of Garrett's caliber, someone known around the league for discipline, professionalism, and composure, allegedly told his head coach that the franchise was being sabotaged not by injuries or scheme, but by bad leadership decisions and political football. And the part that sent social media and analyst circles into chaos? The mention of Shadur Sanders. Yes, the talented rookie quarterback who, week after week, has quietly sat the bench while Browns fans pleaded for change. According to reports, Garrett allegedly demanded that Stefanski stop holding Shedeur back, stop protecting the coaching staff's reputation, and start building for the future. Now, not in some theoretical rebuild, but right now, already in motion. Again, none of this has been confirmed publicly, but credible insiders say Garrett's outburst wasn't some heat-of-the-moment tantrum. It was described as controlled rage, a veteran leader reaching the end of his patience. A player who's given everything to the team now watching, helpless, as the season collapses around broken decisions and stubborn egos. The locker room reportedly fell silent. Nobody stepped in, nobody walked out, because, according to sources, they knew. Garrett wasn't alone in how he felt. Others just hadn't had the courage or the influence to say it first. And that silence? That stillness from the rest of the locker room? That may have been the loudest moment of all. Because if a guy like Myles Garrett, someone known league-wide as a locker room stabilizer, is reaching his limit, what does that say about what's really happening inside this organization? And what happens next? That night, the Browns didn't just lose a game. They lost something far more dangerous: unity. The lines between player and coach reportedly blurred. Leadership was challenged, trust was put on trial, and the bottled-up frustrations of a season gone sideways finally exploded into the open. But more importantly, if this confrontation even partially happened in the way it's being described, it's no longer about a quarterback controversy. It's about control, direction, identity. It's about whether or not the people running the Browns are even on the same page with the players actually doing the hard work every week. Because when one of the league's biggest stars reportedly looks his coach in the eye and questions the entire foundation of the operation, you're no longer just dealing with team drama. You're dealing with a crisis. And we haven't even gotten to the worst part yet, because the real turning point wasn't just what Garrett allegedly said, but why he and others think this team is self-destructing behind one decision that could change everything. What makes this story so volatile isn't just that Myles Garrett allegedly exploded after the Jets' loss. It's what he said, and more importantly, what it revealed. Because if the reports are even partly accurate, Garrett's confrontation wasn't emotional venting. It was an unfiltered indictment of how this team is being run at its core, an eruption that exposed everything shaking beneath the surface all season long. Let's break down what insiders claim Garrett actually said and why it hits deeper than any box score ever could. Defensive burnout and unfair pressure. First and foremost, Garrett reportedly hammered the idea that his defensive unit has been carrying the franchise week after week, game after game, only to watch it all collapse thanks to an offense that seems completely out of sync. Teammates have hinted at it before. Analysts have said it out loud, but Garrett allegedly made it impossible to ignore. From missed tackles to total mental exhaustion, the Browns' defense has been asked to do everything: hold leads, flip momentum, generate turnovers, keep games close with no help on the other side of the ball. And eventually, even elite defenses break under that kind of one-sided pressure. Garrett reportedly said what every veteran defender has probably thought at some point this season: how long can we keep carrying this team before we collapse? He allegedly accused the coaching staff of making the defense shoulder a burden that should be shared, and by most accounts, he wasn't wrong. Offensive inconsistency and scheme stagnation. But Garrett's frustration didn't stop with pointing fingers at the offense in general. Sources claim he got highly specific. He allegedly called out play calling, coaching decisions, and repetitive schemes that have produced minimal results despite having talent at key skill positions. Multiple Browns fans have shouted this for weeks online. The offense looks predictable, stale, and completely out of sync with the modern NFL. The timing is off. The creativity is gone. And the numbers don't lie. Cleveland ranks near the bottom in offensive efficiency and red zone scoring. Insiders say Garrett demanded the coaches recognize that their system isn't working and that they're dragging the roster down because of it. And then the conversation got personal. That's when the topic reportedly turned to Shadur Sanders. The Shedeur situation, political football? This is where things shift from football to philosophy, and why this story has gone viral across NFL platforms. Garrett allegedly challenged Stefanski directly on the team's refusal to give Shadur Sanders a legitimate shot as starting quarterback, not in a subtle, passive-aggressive way, but in a way that stunned everyone around him. He reportedly accused the staff of playing scared and holding the team hostage by sticking with a failed strategy out of ego or fear. He isn't the only one wondering this either. Analysts, fans, even some former players have questioned why a rookie quarterback with talent, maturity, and clear football IQ still hasn't been given meaningful game time, especially when the offense continues to struggle week after week. Shedur's limited reps, his benching, the mixed messaging from Stefanski during interviews. It's all created a cloud of speculation, and according to insiders, Garrett helped drag that controversy into the open, where it could no longer be avoided. Some sources claim he demanded to know if team decisions were being made to protect prior mistakes, resisting Shedur's rise simply because starting him would be seen as admitting the previous quarterback plan was a massive failure. Let that sink in. This isn't just about reps, or snaps, or game packages. This is about identity. Pride, control. Garrett reportedly told Stefanski that keeping Shedeur on the sideline was not only hurting the team in the short term, but risking its entire future. And even more shocking, there are whispers that multiple other players nodded in agreement or stayed conspicuously silent, like this was a conversation they had all been waiting to have, but didn't dare start themselves. The underlying message: the team's philosophy is broken. When a leader like Garrett speaks up, it's not just about the X's and O's, it's about values, and what the reports suggest is that he no longer believes in the direction this team is moving. He sees a coaching staff clinging to control, sticking to a plan that clearly isn't working, and ignoring what's right in front of them: the next quarterback, the future of the franchise, and a chance to turn the season around while there's still time. And in Garrett's eyes, according to insiders, the decision to leave Shadur Sanders on the bench hasn't just become a point of strategic confusion. It's become a symbol of dysfunction, the moment that changed the narrative. After that confrontation, everything changed. Once that conversation reportedly happened, once Garrett's frustrations were voiced, the media narrative took on a life of its own. Now, every coverage breakdown, every failed drive, every silent post-game quote seems loaded with hidden meaning. Fans are reading between the lines, reporters are asking tougher questions, and even neutral analysts are weighing in, saying the Browns may be dealing with a full-blown mutiny behind the scenes. Because if Garrett was willing to say the quiet part out loud, how many others feel exactly the same? This isn't just a quarterback controversy anymore, this is a philosophical revolt. And if the coaching staff doesn't course-correct quickly, they may not be the ones around to fix it once the season ends. By the time the clock hit 0 in MetLife Stadium, the Browns didn't just walk off with a loss. They walked off, fractured, exposed, and dangerously close to something no coach ever wants to admit: a broken locker room. What allegedly happened between Myles Garrett and Kevin Stefanski wasn't just about a single argument. It was a spark that lit up every hidden crack, every quiet frustration, every unspoken divide that had been simmering behind closed doors for weeks, maybe months. And as multiple insiders quickly reported, Garrett's voice might have been the loudest, but it wasn't the only one. An explosion that had been building for weeks. When teams are winning, tension gets masked, disagreements stay internal. Players stay focused because results silence doubt. But when you're underperforming, when talent is being wasted, and no one seems to take accountability, doubt grows louder than the game itself. That's what makes this so explosive. According to several reports from NFL insiders and beat writers close to the team, there have been whispers of internal discontent all year long. Muted at first, unofficial, but consistent. Now, in the aftermath of what insiders are calling the most emotionally charged post-game atmosphere of the season, the veil is off. Sources within the team describe a locker room that's not just disappointed, it's disillusioned. Some players are reportedly angry, others are reportedly numb. But almost no one seems to be surprised that Garrett finally said it out loud, or that things reached a boiling point after the Jets game. And this is where the real story lives, not just in the confrontation itself, but in what it reveals about the emotional wreckage underneath the surface of the Cleveland Browns. Two camps, one locker room. Insider accounts say the locker room has quietly split into two philosophical camps. First, the trust the process group players who believe the team is still on the right path. That development takes time, and that Stefanski's methodical approach will eventually pay off. These are typically veterans aligned with the coaching staff or younger guys still earning their spot. Then there's the other group, the frustrated but silent majority. Players who've reportedly been biting their tongues, questioning decisions, and waiting for someone with the credibility and status to say what they've all been thinking. That someone, it seems, was Myles Garrett. Multiple sources suggest that after the locker room confrontation, players didn't speak up not because they disagreed, but because they agreed and didn't want to escalate it any further. The silence, the lack of pushback, that's what stunned insiders the most. They expected a divided reaction. Instead, what they got was quiet confirmation, not in words, but in body language, eye contact, and the kind of tension that fills the air when truth finally punches through the walls of corporate coaching culture. You can only tape over the cracks so long before an earthquake rips everything open. The confrontation goes public. Fast? Within hours, the rumor had already leaked. Somehow, someway, details of the Garrett-Stefanski showdown made their way into media circles before most of the players even left the building. That tells you just how urgent and volatile the situation had become. Journalists began referencing unnamed team sources. Reporters close to the Browns dropped cryptic tweets. NFL insiders who typically stay silent on team drama were suddenly quoting heated veteran-player interactions and multiple points of internal conflict. This wasn't speculation anymore. It was a media storm. And just like that, what could have been contained inside four walls became front-page material for every NFL debate desk in America. Players losing faith in leadership? When the face of your franchise defense reportedly stands up and tells the head coach that the team is being sabotaged by ego and fear, and when no one pushes back, what does that say about your leadership? That's the question everyone began asking. Suddenly, fans on social media weren't just asking why the offense ran 3-yard outs on 3rd and 12. They were asking bigger questions like, has Kevin Stefanski lost the locker room? Are Browns players quietly revolting against the front office philosophy? Is Shadur Sanders the real reason this team is divided? Because the moment a veteran steps up and says what the team is scared to admit publicly, everything changes. Doubts that were once whispered in film rooms are now screamed across national broadcasts. Analyst panels go from "What's wrong with the Browns?" to "How long does Stefanski have left?" It's no longer about playoff hopes. It's about organizational control. Some players, reportedly, walking on eggshells. Another troubling pattern insiders noted, the growing culture of silence within the team. Players have reportedly stopped giving open, honest answers to the media. Press conference quotes have turned robotic. Interviews are filled with cliches and deflections. Some players are declining interview requests altogether, not because they have nothing to say, but because, according to one source, they don't want to be the next headline. That's not normal. That's damage control from inside the locker room itself. You don't get to that place unless guys are seriously questioning their role, their direction, and the motivations behind every coaching decision. The fear isn't about opponents anymore. It's about whether leadership is making decisions in bad faith to prove a point, save face, or protect reputations. That's how locker rooms start to splinter. This is the tipping point. The Jets' loss didn't split the team, it exposed a split that had already formed slowly over time. A team can survive injuries, bad games, and controversy. But once trust between players and coaches starts to dissolve, that's when the bleeding starts, and sometimes never stops. The Browns are teetering on the edge of that moment right now. Myles Garrett, a player respected across the league for professionalism and leadership, chose to make his voice heard. And if what he said is even half true, it reflects a much larger internal collapse than anything visible on the scoreboard. Because once players stop believing in the system breaks. And if the front office doesn't act quickly, if they don't address the core issues that players have reportedly been stewing on for weeks, they're not just risking the end of a season, they're risking the implosion of a franchise. It's one thing for a rookie quarterback to sit behind a veteran. It happens all the time. Teams develop their young QBs slowly. Give them time to learn, and avoid throwing them into high-pressure situations too early in their careers. But this situation in Cleveland? This feels different. This feels personal. This feels deliberate. Because while fans and talking heads have been focused on the Browns' collapsing offense, and analysts have dissected every missed opportunity and ill-timed play call, a much deeper question has been fueling the true controversy behind the scenes. Why isn't Shadur Sanders starting? It's not just a football decision anymore. It's a symbol. A clear line dividing those who believe in the future and those desperately clinging to the past. And now, with rumors swirling that superstar defender Myles Garrett confronted Kevin Stefanski and directly called out the coaching staff for refusing to start Shedeur, that question has exploded beyond football circles. This isn't about talent anymore. It's become a referendum on identity, ego, politics, and power. A rookie making veterans uncomfortable? Inside NFL locker rooms, rookies are told to wait their turn, prove themselves, earn the respect of the vets before they speak up. But everything we've seen from Shadur Sanders on and off the field suggests he's not your typical rookie. He's poised, highly intelligent, calm under pressure. He walks like a leader, talks like a field general. And according to those who know him best, coaches, teammates, college mentors, he's one of the hardest workers in the building. And that's where things get sticky. Because when a rookie quarterback walks into a franchise and starts commanding this much respect without even playing, it throws a wrench into the politics of NFL hierarchy. Coaches get uncomfortable, veteran quarterbacks feel the pressure, and suddenly, decisions aren't about who's ready, they're about who's safe. Insiders say Shedeur has repeatedly flashed elite-level leadership traits in meetings, practice sessions, and film breakdowns. He's even been praised publicly for his football IQ during media availability. So the lingering question remains, what exactly are the Browns afraid of? A carefully controlled development timeline. Let's be clear, Stefanski and the Browns staff have never come out and said Shedeur isn't ready. In fact, they've specifically avoided saying anything concrete at all. They've kept their message vague. He's learning. We're taking our time. He'll be ready when he's ready. Sounds smart. Until you start looking at the bigger picture. Shedeur's reps in training camp? Limited. His preseason snaps? Minimal. His first appearance in regular season action? Thrown in without getting a single first-team snap prior to that game. According to his own words, that wasn't development, that was mismanagement, and it sparked a chain reaction inside the organization, one that still hasn't settled. Former players sounded off on national television. Analysts warned that Cleveland might be wasting a generational-level quarterback prospect. And fans? They've been slamming the panic button for months. And yet, nothing. Not a change in starter, not an expanded role, not even a statement acknowledging the swirling controversy. Just silence. Strategic, calculated silence. And as those questions grew louder, the line between quarterback depth chart and organizational dysfunction became impossible to ignore. The real risk: fear of being wrong. What makes this so much more than just a depth chart dispute is the growing belief within league circles that Shedeur's delay isn't about preparation, it's about protection. Specifically, protection of the coaching staff's previous decisions, their systems, their evaluations, their egos. Because let's be honest, the moment Shadur Sanders takes the field and performs well, everything changes. It would retroactively indict months of decisions made by Stefanski and his staff. It would raise questions about why an elite-level player was being hidden in plain sight. It would beg the kind of scrutiny that front offices usually try to avoid at all costs. And above all, it would expose the possibility that the team's entire offensive direction this year has been fundamentally flawed. So what's easier? Stick with the status quo. Delay the inevitable. Control the narrative. Buy yourself time. Even if it comes at the cost of the future. Shedeur isn't just a quarterback anymore, he's a symbol. Internally, players understand the value of leadership. They respond to presence, work ethic, energy, and by all accounts, those are the exact traits that Shedeur brings into the locker room every single day. That's why some veterans, reportedly including Myles Garrett, can't stay silent any longer. Because when you're giving everything you have on defense, and watching the offense crumble while a potential franchise quarterback stands on the sideline holding a clipboard, it doesn't just create frustration, it breeds resentment. Quiet. Subtle, but poisonous. And when that frustration leaks into the media, which it has, the locker room dynamic shifts dangerously. You're not just dealing with a developmental timeline anymore, you're dealing with a philosophical civil war. One side wants to evolve, build for the future, embrace a more dynamic system led by a new voice. The other side wants to protect what's already been built, even if it's driving the team over a cliff. And at the center of this entire debate is a rookie who's barely touched the field. Shadur Sanders represents more than talent. He represents change. In every franchise, at every level, there comes a moment where a player becomes more than just a jersey and a stat line. They become a challenge to the system itself. That's what Shedeur is now. He's the line in the sand between progress and stagnation. The question isn't whether he's ready. It's whether the Browns have the courage to stop playing scared and finally hand him the keys. Because if the reports about Garrett are true, and if other players are quietly standing behind him, it's clear. The Browns don't just have a quarterback controversy. They have a team on edge, a culture at war with itself, and a future that's being held hostage by fear. And if something doesn't change soon, Cleveland won't just lose Shadur Sanders. They'll lose the locker room forever. They say pressure reveals character. And if that's true, then Kevin Stefanski is running out of places to hide. What started as postseason expectations for the Browns has now morphed into a full-blown organizational meltdown that no one saw coming this early or this violently. The story isn't just about bad football anymore. The story is about trust, and right now, Stefanski is at the center of a storm that he may no longer be able to weather. Because when your players start questioning your leadership, when fans turn on you publicly, and when the media begins tearing apart every decision you've made in the past 6 months, it doesn't matter what happened on the field. The real damage is being done off it. And every sign points to the same undeniable truth. Stefanski is rapidly losing control. Publicly calm, privately collapsing? If you listen to Stefanski's post-game comments after the Jets' loss, you'd think everything was under control. He stepped to the podium, kept his expression neutral, and delivered the same cookie-cutter response he's used after past disappointments. We just have to execute better. We'll go back, watch the film, and make adjustments. But this wasn't just another tough loss. This was a national embarrassment piled on top of weeks, months of offensive inconsistency and frustrating leadership. And no amount of calm coach speak could put out the 5-alarm fire now burning around him. Because while Stefanski stuck to a professional script, everything else was unraveling behind the scenes. Reports were already out. The confrontation with Myles Garrett was already circulating on social media. Fans were crashing comment sections, lighting up call-in shows, tagging Stefanski directly with one question on repeat. How much longer are we supposed to trust the process? Losing the locker room. NFL franchises are driven by one thing more than playbooks and formations: belief. Do the players believe in the vision? Do they buy into the system? Do they trust the man at the top? Because the moment that belief breaks, so does the team. And right now, multiple signs suggest Stefanski is teetering dangerously close to losing the locker room entirely. Myles Garrett's emotional post-game frustrations may have been the explosion, but insiders are saying this was just the final straw, that players have been growing more vocal behind closed doors for weeks. And those voices? They're not just rookies or bench warmers. They're starters, veterans, guys who are tired of the same bland game plan, the same quarterback excuses, the same empty press conferences that never match what's actually happening on the field. The team's morale is bad, one insider said. Guys feel like they're being silenced, like they can't speak up or they'll get phased out. Multiple sources have confirmed that some players are now taking a show up, clock in, clock out mentality. Not because they don't care, but because they no longer believe their voices matter. That's how cultures collapse. A coaching identity crisis. Here's the real problem Stefanski is facing. His philosophy doesn't match his roster. He was brought in to stabilize the Browns, calm the chaos, run a structured, conservative, smart football operation. And early on, it worked. He helped Cleveland find an identity and gave fans something to believe in. But the league evolved. Offenses opened up. Young quarterbacks started taking over the spotlight across the NFL. And instead of adapting, Cleveland's coaching staff stayed rigid. While other franchises tailored their systems around emerging rookie talent, the Browns doubled down on structure on outdated schemes, predictable play calls, and carefully limited offensive freedom. And with Shadur Sanders now waiting to break out, the coaching staff has chosen to cling to control instead of embracing potential. That's no longer leadership, that's insecurity. And it's slowly becoming Stefanski's legacy. Media turning up the heat. After the Jets debacle and the leaked Garrett confrontation, the media world didn't just report the story, it devoured it. Across every major network, analysts called Stefanski's approach outdated, ego-driven, a system that protects coaches, not players. Emergency debate segments were launched. Former players were brought in to speculate on locker room reactions. Former NFL head coaches began openly complaining about how Cleveland was managing their young quarterback, with managing their young quarterback. Dead NFL head coaches began openly complaining about how Cleveland was managing their young quarterback. One analyst didn't mince words. Not putting Shadur Sanders on the field isn't just bad football, it's malpractice. If Stefanski's trying to save face instead of saving the season, he's a bigger problem than anyone realized, and the pressure has only intensified since. Every interview, every injury update, every coach response is being dissected and reinterpreted through the lens of a collapsing regime. That's how people talk about coaches on the brink. The fan base has had enough. If Stefanski thought media criticism and locker room tension were tough, that's nothing compared to what the fan base is doing right now. After the Jets game, social media platforms, especially X, formerly Twitter, absolutely erupted. Fans weren't just angry, they were done. Dozens of Browns content creators, from YouTube shows to TikTokers to sports radio callers, all began echoing one thing: he's lost us. Polls began circulating. Should Stefanski be fired? Thousands voted. An overwhelming yes. Fan theories exploded. Stefanski is sabotaging Sanders to protect his career. The front office doesn't want Shedeur to succeed yet. The team is being managed based on pride instead of performance. Now, regardless of what's fact or fiction, the perception is what matters, and right now the cultural narrative is crystal clear. Stefanski is no longer the guy fans believe in. Not as a leader, not as a strategist, not as the man who can guide this team through a storm. The final countdown. It's impossible to know if the Browns will make a change before the season ends, but the writing is already on the wall. If Stefanski doesn't hand the offense to Shadur Sanders soon, he may never get the chance to. Because even if the front office still backs the coach, the players might not. The fans definitely don't. And the media? They're sharpening their knives before every single post-game appearance. This is more than just a crossroads. This is a crisis of identity. Right now, Kevin Stefanski is facing the biggest challenge of his professional career, not drawing up a perfect play or managing a game clock. His new job is surviving a mutiny. And unless something changes dramatically in the next few weeks, survivors might be the only ones left standing in Berea. Every collapse has a beginning, every explosion has a fuse, and the Browns' current crisis? That fuse was lit months ago. What we're seeing now, the locker room tension, the alleged confrontation, the quarterback controversy, the complete loss of faith in leadership, none of it came out of nowhere. It didn't start with the loss to the Jets. That was simply the ignition point. The Browns' current implosion can be traced back through a series of moments, each more questionable, avoidable, and revealing than the last. One decision at a time. One rumor at a time. One red flag after another, until there was nothing left to cover the cracks. So let's rewind the tape. Because when you lay this timeline out step by step, the picture becomes undeniable. This collapse was coming. Everyone just ignored it. Do stage 1. Shadur Sanders makes headlines, but not for the right reason. It all begins with one line. One quote. One rookie quarterback, speaking honestly after making his NFL game debut. I didn't get any first-team reps. It was a chilling moment of clarity, not because Shadur Sanders was complaining, but because that single sentence immediately revealed a lack of preparation at the highest level. How does a team draft a potential franchise quarterback and then throw him into a real NFL game without giving him even a single first-team snap beforehand? Analysts were stunned. Fans were furious. Teammates, according to insiders, were confused. Instead of preparing their young quarterback, Stefanski's staff had seemingly done the opposite, kept him in the dark. And just like that, the buzz began. Was this intentional? Was Sanders being sidelined for reasons that had nothing to do with football? Stage 2. Offensive struggles turn into a pattern. As the weeks wore on, the Browns' offense didn't just stumble, it stagnated. Drive after drive, game after game, the same issues repeated. Poor spacing, conservative play calling, failures on third down, red zone inefficiency. Meanwhile, the defense led by Myles Garrett was bailing out the offense over and over again, often keeping the Browns in games they had no business being in. Yet game plans never changed, game day decisions never evolved, quarterback adjustments barely existed, and Sanders remained glued to the sideline. That's when the tension reportedly started to grow louder internally. Players began to question the stubbornness of the staff. Not just about who was playing quarterback, but about why the entire offense was being protected by silence. By this point, everyone could see something was off. But it still hadn't boiled over. Not yet. At stage 3, Dillon Gabriel's interview adds more fuel. Then, just when things seemed to level out, another bomb dropped. Backup quarterback Dillon Gabriel sat down for a seemingly routine interview, and what he said turned a quiet storm into a visible thunderclap. Without naming names, Gabriel described in detail the difficulty of navigating a situation where reps are controlled and knowing there are guys who could help us win that don't get looked at. He was careful, political, measured, but his point came across clearly. Something strange was happening inside the QB room, and it wasn't about talent, it was about control. For fans and analysts, Gabriel's comments confirmed what many had already suspected. Cleveland's coaching staff was playing power games, not football. And the whispers got louder. To air, stage 4. Chris Canty goes nuclear on live TV. Then came the moment everything spilled beyond Cleveland. Former NFL defensive lineman Chris Canty went off on national television directly accusing Kevin Stefanski of deliberately holding back Shadur Sanders to avoid making certain staff look bad. This wasn't some podcast, this was ESPN, prime viewership, fully uncensored football fury. Canty didn't present it as speculation, he presented it like fact. You don't just keep a guy like Shedeur on the bench unless you're afraid of the answer. It wasn't just a mic drop moment, it was a viral one. Clips spread across social media like wildfire. Fans started connecting dots. Media segments suddenly reshaped their coverage. Everyone stopped talking about statistics and started talking about strategy. And through it all, Stefanski stayed quiet. Shadur? Still benched. The tension, now impossible to ignore. Due stage 5. The trade rumor that shattered any sense of trust. Then came the doomsday scenario. Reports surfaced that Shadur Sanders' name had quietly come up in a Browns internal trade discussion. It wasn't confirmed, it wasn't even detailed. But that headline alone sent the fanbase into an immediate meltdown. Was Cleveland really considering trading away the most promising quarterback they've had in years before giving him a single meaningful opportunity? Was this about football or egos? Despite multiple attempts at nothing to see here, explanations from the team's media reps, belief in the front office began to collapse completely. This wasn't just bad optics anymore. This was looking like organizational sabotage. An entire fan base went into defensive mode. Petitions were created. Hashtags started trending. And behind the scenes, according to reports, players were livid. DEDS Stage 6. The Jets gained the spark that lit the fire. After weeks of brewing tension and quiet fractures in team culture, it all detonated. The loss to the Jets wasn't historic by score, but it was historic by context. It was the perfect storm. A winnable game. Tragically mismanaged. Another week of offensive incompetence. Another chance for Shedeur to play wasted. And finally, the reported locker room eruption from Myles Garrett locker room eruption. In a single night, everything boiled over. And by morning, the Browns weren't being talked about for their record or playoff seeding. They were being talked about as an organization in freefall. The final picture, this was never just about one player. When you step back and look at every moment, from the first missed snap to the Garrett blowup, it becomes clear. What's happening in Cleveland isn't confusing, it's inevitable. The patterns weren't hidden, the signals weren't subtle. A quarterback controversy born out of silence. A coaching staff wrapped in fear-based decisions. Star players reportedly begging for common sense. A fan base losing every bit of hope in the long-term plan. The Browns didn't fall apart overnight. They walked themselves off the cliff step by step, and now they're staring down the consequences. If you zoom out far enough, past the drama, past the headlines, past the missed throws and broken coverage, one truth begins to rise above the noise. The Cleveland Browns are standing at a crossroads. One path leads to another chapter in a long, painful story. A familiar story, a cycle of dysfunction driven by fear, mismanagement, and missed potential. It ends the same way it always ends, with another head coach out the door, another promising player wasted, and another decade of rebuilding. The other path? It's not easy, or clean, or comfortable, but it leads forward. It starts with ownership opening its eyes and asking difficult questions about the current leadership's unwillingness to adapt. It starts with a coaching staff being honest, not politically correct, not PR polished, but brutally honest about what has and hasn't worked. It starts with giving Shadur Sanders the shot that players, fans, and even outside analysts say he's already earned. Because everything this franchise is dealing with, from the locker room unrest, to the media meltdowns, to the eruption of Myles Garrett's frustration, connects back to this one issue: the refusal to adapt, the refusal to evolve, the refusal to move on. From control-based coaching philosophies, to fear of being wrong, to quarterback decisions rooted in pride instead of performance. So now the biggest question facing this team isn't about defensive schemes or quarterback mechanics. It's this: do the Cleveland Browns have the courage to get out of their own way? Because clock is ticking, not just on this season's playoff hopes, but on the entire culture of the team. How long can veterans like Myles Garrett be expected to carry the emotional and physical weight of a failing system? How long can locker room leaders bite their tongues about coaching decisions that leave the team stuck? How long can ownership remain silent while one of the most talented rosters in franchise history is sabotaged from the inside? And perhaps most importantly, how long can you ask a fan base, this passionate, loyal, long-suffering fan base, to keep believing in the plan when all the signs say the plan is broken? Because right now, whether the Browns want to admit it or not, this situation is spiraling far beyond one game, one quarterback, or one confrontation. This is about identity. Who are the Cleveland Browns? Are they the team that leans into its talent, embraces the moment, and isn't afraid to take bold steps toward a better future? Or are they another franchise too scared to evolve? Too prideful to course correct? Too fragile to listen to the very voices that know what greatness requires? Make no mistake, the Browns are no longer just fighting for playoff positioning. They're fighting for control of their own legacy. The fallout has already started. With each passing day, more questions emerge. More insiders leak whispered frustrations. More fans plant their flags on social media and demand change. If what was reported is even half true, that Myles Garrett, one of the league's most respected players, stood inside that locker room and directly confronted Kevin Stefanski with raw emotion and brutal honesty, then this isn't just a story about Garrett being frustrated. It's about a locker room waking up. It's about a superstar forcing everyone in that building, players, coaches, owners, to look in the mirror and face what they've been avoiding all season. And now that it's out there, there's no turning back. Because once leadership is questioned, once the plan is no longer believed in, once the player-coach trust begins to disintegrate, you either act or prepare for a collapse that no locker room speech can fix. What happens next? That's the million-dollar question. Will ownership do what fans are demanding and make a bold change at quarterback and leadership? Will Stefanski swallow pride and throw away a broken playbook to finally unleash the offense around a rookie screaming with potential? Or will this franchise do what it's done so often in the past, stall, deflect, and slowly circle the drain while talent walks out the door? Nobody knows what'll happen tomorrow, but what's dead certain is this: the Browns can't walk out of this story the same way they walked into it. They've been called out. They've been exposed. And whether they like it or not, they're now on the clock. This next decision? It's not just about winning a game. It's about the next 5 years of Cleveland football. And when you look back at this exact moment, this confrontation, this chaos, this fracture, you might realize this was the turning point the entire time. So, what now? Will Shadur Sanders finally get his shot? Will Stefanski survive this firestorm? Will the Browns finally evolve or implode? We don't know the answers yet, but we'll be watching. Outro prompt for viewers. If you made it this far, drop A in the comments to let us know you're riding through this with us. Let us know. Should the Browns start Shadur Sanders now? Or are fans just overreacting? Smash that like button if this gave you the full truth they're afraid to say on TV. To end, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because we're not done covering this story. Not even close. And one thing's for sure: the next chapter in Cleveland is coming faster than anyone's ready for.